Oli Bell. Well, I'm talking to a pro presenter today. Oli, you are incredibly well known, one of the leading presenters in not only horse racing, presenting for the likes of Royal Ascot, for the Grand National. You are a leading voice in particularly the horse racing community, but also you've covered things like darts, football. What do you get from presenting?
That's a really good question. I get a buzz, first and foremost. It's quite an adrenaline fueled job. It's not sat behind a desk doing accounts. No disrespect to any accountants that are listening to this. Like when you're just about to go live, you mentioned the Grand National, there's lots of people watching it. Undoubtedly, that gives you a few butterflies in the stomach. So there's a great kind of adrenaline level to the job and the excitements that come with it. And then also as well, it's very fulfilling from a career point of view. It's quite a good job to see an obvious trajectory. I started as a runner and now, as you mentioned, presenting for ITV, which is, I'm very privileged to be in that position. But I've been able to see growth throughout my career as well. So I suppose that I've been rewarded for hard work and seen the rewards for that and things like that. So on every level, I feel like it is a very rewarding job. I will always acknowledge that I'm in an incredibly fortunate position and am one of the lucky ones that get to present horse racing on terrestrial television. There's not many of us. But ultimately, it's a rewarding job. And fundamentally, I don't ever feel like it's a job as well. And I think that at its core is probably the most important thing for me is that I do something I genuinely really love and am passionate about and enjoy. So going to work never feels like going to work.
I mean, your awareness of how lucky you are, I think that carries through to a lot of people who seem to be really in sync with doing something that they love, but something they're also very good at, and clearly puts you in a position where you connect with people when you're doing it. When you're presenting, what's going through your mind? What to you, there's this concept of a North Star for businesses, for Airbnb, I think it's like number of nights booked. Like, what to you is your North Star when you're presenting? What do you most want to give people?
Well, I think you've touched on it there. What's really important is authenticity. And actually, how I find this out is not necessarily, excuse me, on the shows that I present. And in work, I find this out more outside of work. I've got a bug in my throat, not great for a presenter. But when people see me away from work and they say, you're very similar to how you are when you present, that to me is the sort of the golden point, really, because I don't want to present like a caricature of a TV presenter. I want to be me going into people's living rooms on a Saturday morning when I'm doing the opening show or what have you. And I want them afterwards to go, oh yeah, he's just the same. He's not trying to be anything he's not. He's a bit of an idiot. He's quite charming sometimes. He's funny, polite, whatever it is, right? But ultimately, I don't want to deviate from who I am because I think, one, the audience can see through that. And two, it's just very hard to like maintain the mask when you're presenting a weekly program, right? If you present once every 6 months, you can probably get away with it. But ultimately, when you're on as regularly as we are, it's just impossible to be anything other than yourself over a 10-year period or whatever it is we've done. To me, that's the real kind of sweet spot. And I know that some people will have a very different way of working, but like I don't go into work, obviously I know what I'm talking about, but I like to let things happen organically. I think anything that's like overly prepared comes across as that. And so the more relaxed, off the cuff, kind of authentic it is, the more enjoyable it is for the audience. They like mistakes when they go wrong. We all go, oh my God, this is a disaster. But actually, it's quite entertaining. As long as you're quick and sharp and on it, it's only talking about horses running around. I feel like nothing's going to be really that bad. So I think those are the keys to me.
And are there some things you're thinking about if you're covering an event? Is it about plucking out the story? Do you feel as the role of a presenter?
I think it's twofold. I think it's always having an awareness journalistically of the story. I think that's very important. And I think it's to maximize the pundits as well. So I think you've got to get the best out of your experts that are alongside you. In most sports that people would watch, they would have ex-professionals as the pundits. on ITV, for example, we have Ruby Walsh. He's brilliant. Luke Harvey, Mick Fitzgerald, AP McCoy. These are former jockeys. So they've lived and breathed what we're talking about in many ways. And so I think my role as the presenter is to try and tap into the questions that the audience might want to know from a sort of bird's eye view point of view. But ultimately, I think when we cover an event, and the Grand National is obviously a big example, probably the main example, there are lots of people watching racing that wouldn't ordinarily on that day. And it is occasionally quite a jarring race to watch. You have to have an awareness of what you're talking about and who you're talking to. And therefore, you can't be flippant in anything. You can't be dismissive because we're in a little racing bubble. You have to be fully aware of society. And I know that sounds quite profound, but I think it's very true. We broadcast to a wide spectrum of people with differing views, differing beliefs, differing religions, etc. When you're broadcasting on a national broadcaster, you have to be aware of the nation that you're broadcasting to. And there's like obviously hyper focus on the Grand National. But if you have that mentality throughout, then you'll always have, hopefully, that sort of broad church mentality, which is, again, what I would hope to achieve when I'm broadcasting, that you connect with as many people as possible.
And really that can only come from a product of being grounded and self-aware. So clearly serves you in lots of ways. Being human, part of being human is you're not going to feel the same every day. So sometimes that can be a good thing because sometimes we can feel unbelievable for reasons, you know, that we'll let the listeners have an idea of what those reasons might be. But for the days that are actually, maybe you've got a cold or something's happened in your personal life or a worry has just got your attention, you're about to go on air. How do you just refocus and just look down one lane?
Oh, that probably comes into a slightly different point for me, because as a general rule, I'm fairly level throughout. Do you know what I mean? Like if I've got a cold, then I've just got to I sound a bit coldy and just get on with it. But in terms of deviating and being quite volatile, not that's what you're implying, but I guess being up and down and carrying that to work and then portraying that on screen, rarely, and I'm obviously bocking myself here because something disastrous is going to happen, but rarely have I woken up and been like, this is all too much. I don't know. I'm distracted by this. Everything has been, and I don't want to sound arrogant in this sense, but everything's been pretty easy in terms of my life is not that stressful. There are real stresses out there. There are real problems. And, what's really the worst thing that's happening to me at the moment is like picking paint colours for my mum's house and her being stressed about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not going to carry that to work. And so I've always been quite, and I hope that doesn't come across as up my own arse, but ultimately nothing really gets to me because I hopefully have a good sense of reality, basically. Nothing's too bad and nothing's too good, ultimately.
Yeah, but also experience accounts for a lot, and will keep the motions going forward. Different presenters and people take different parts of the sport and really relish in different sides to that. How do you feel what part of, let's say, racing do you feel that you're particularly interested in or you want to really voice in a way that perhaps is different to other people in that world?
It's necessarily different, but I think the thing that captured me about racing was at its core was its link to family. My granddad got me into racing, my uncle's a trainer, my dad broadcasts in racing. So to me, it's quite a unifying thing for a family. Sat around the sofa watching the racing on a Saturday afternoon is quite a nostalgic area for me. And therefore, I see that when I'm at the races. You see a lot of families going racing, dads with their kids or families enjoying a day at the races. And that kind of continuation is quite obvious to see a lot. So I think for me, that element of things is important to portray as well. It's very much, I think, quite a bonding sport, really, for families. I think it's something that everyone can get behind. Whether someone might love the horses, someone might love the colours, someone might love studying the form, someone might love punting, right? Betting. But ultimately, you're all liking the same thing, really, and that is horse racing. Someone might like a day out, someone might like getting dressed up or whatever it is, right? But ultimately, everyone can enjoy it for different reasons. So that's very important. And I do think one thing that actually I have always been fond of and done and practiced and enjoyed is the betting side of things. I wasn't a rider, so I wasn't going to be a jockey for all that I briefly thought about it before I grew. But like when I've started out in the sport, betting's always been quite a big part of my life. And I don't mean that in a sort of problem gambler way, but ultimately they are intrinsically linked. And I think that we should have a bit more confidence around the fact that betting and racing are intrinsically linked. Nowadays, it's a bit of a dirty word. There's a lot of focus on government on it and things like that. So I think that for someone who's quite proud to bet, who's had success playing poker, for example, I don't see it as a negative connotation necessarily. Obviously, there are a small percentage of people who have issues with it. People like a glass of wine, but there are alcoholics out there. People can like a bet without having a problem. And I think we should be a bit prouder of that. And that's something I want to maintain throughout, that sort of the fact that they go hand in hand, and we shouldn't be embarrassed about that.
And poker. So some people listening won't know Ollie's an exceptional poker player, truly passionate. And you're a professional player. Would that be correct?
Yeah. I have a job, but I guess I play to a professional standard, if that makes sense.
What do you feel it's? I speak as someone who can barely navigate Texas Hold'em. What has poker taught you around how to deal with other things in life? Maybe there's something around patience, or
yeah, poker has taught me so much, and so much that I brought into both my professional and personal life, I would say. On a professional sense, I think you have to, when you sit down on a poker table in a casino live and you're trying to suss out the sort of competition, if you like, you have to very quickly read the room and read the personalities in the room. And obviously, when you're interviewing someone, to a certain extent, that's what you're doing in a very quick way. You're like working out when to press for an answer, when to ease off, when to deliver a question that you might have up your sleeve, whatever it is. That sounds quite calculating, but ultimately you have to judge someone and judge the situation very quickly when you're broadcasting. And that is something that benefits a poker player, being able to work out each individual as quickly as possible. Obviously gives you an edge if you're right. So that
it seems like reading people seems like a bit of an art in that you can't really fully to an extent explain. There's some things about reading people that just can't really be put into words. It's like a sense, I imagine.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's so true. And actually, when I've tried to explain what makes a good poker player from a bad poker player in the past, I've never really been able to articulate it, because I don't think I have the answer as to like why I felt in that spot or in that situation. That what there's no black and white answer. What did that person do in that moment that displayed weakness? But there are signs, there are little cues, basically, whether it's he took slightly longer to bet or he gulped, like little things that actually might be meaningless really, and it might just be total coincidence. But just having an instinct for it I think is what I have, and I don't really know, as I said, no one's taught me it, no one's trained me to do that. But I also think, and this again, I don't want this to sound big-headed, but I think I'm quite good at reading a room because of it. And maybe that came before the poker, and then I was able to be good at poker because I had that skill, or that has been given to me through playing lots of hands of poker and things like that. I don't know what came first. It might be chicken and egg, but definitely, yeah. And I think there's this just kind of instinct for it that can't really be taught. And then as well as that, you do play with people from all different walks of life, right? You're sat down with men, women, all ages, all religions, whatever, all countries. So yeah, you just have to have a kind of awareness of a lot of things when you play poker. And then obviously there's probably an element of like fearlessness and whatever, right? There's lots of like fundamental things that I probably have. But the things that it taught me are respecting everyone, hopefully, and also reading the room quickly. And once you have those skills, then you can do anything.
Speaking of people, there must be so many characters you've met. Let's start with poker. Can you think of some unusual stories you've heard about in the poker realm that kind of unlock this sort of create a bit of mystery?
Well, I don't know how much mystery it creates. I think it has been documented, but there was a very famous incident where at a poker tournament, there's things called like prop bets, so like side bets that are always happening on a poker table. Like when you get to the high rollers, they'll go out for a game of golf, for example, and there would be lots of money bet. And then when they're playing poker, someone might say, look, 100 grand. This is, I don't know whether this happened. I'll tell you about the example I know, or two examples I know, which are quite entertaining. But it might be like only salt and vinegar crisps for the next week. I'll give you 100 grand if you do. And then someone will go, yeah, I'll take that. Someone will go, no, I'll do it for 200. And then someone will lay the 200, whatever. So that happens quite a lot in high stakes poker, just because these guys want a bit of action, as if their life is not exciting enough. They need a bit more. But there was one incident where a guy got bet, I think it was like £1 million to get fake boobs put in for 6 months, I think. So he got paid or bet to have breast implants. And I think he ended up keeping them in for an extra 6 months for some reason. I don't know why. And then there was another one where, and that you can Google that, it did actually happen. And then both of these happened. And then there was another one, which is actually harder, I think, although I haven't given it loads of thought. Someone got bet to live in a bath for, I think it was something like 6 months or 8 months, not in a, I think it was watered. Anyway, there was something around living in a bath for a long time, and the money that was offered was astronomical, and he tried to do it and then gave up because it was like torture, basically. So these things happen a lot, and then you get some real colourful characters, you get the big names. It's not quite as glamorous as it looks, but when it's good, it's very good, because the money is obviously very lucrative and it's exciting.
And are there any characters you've come across that just live very different, unique lives? Perhaps they only go out to play poker.
You're bang on. Like, it is quite isolating. A lot of people go from casino to casino around the UK, sort of living in Airbnbs on their own. When I played in Nottingham, I did quite well in a tournament earlier this year, and I stayed in a hotel on my own, didn't have any outdoor space in the hotel, so I had to just walk around like a little car park every morning just to get some fresh air, and then go to the casino, spend 12 hours in a casino. I didn't really know anyone, so I was on my own, and then it was play for 12 hours, go back, rinse and repeat for 6 days. I think 5 or 6 days, I think I did that. After a while, it's pretty soul destroying. Obviously, you're playing for big money, and that's quite exciting, but it's pretty relentless, basically. Yeah, it can be pretty grim, the whole thing, but obviously when it comes off, it's great.
And you talked how it really brings you to this place of just really switching off, and you find it really relaxing, which in some ways feels, surprising given the nature of the game. Give us an idea around the horse racing world. Obviously, there's so many different stakeholders, and betting's a fascinating area. One thing I'm interested in is just the nature of horse buying. Has that become easier for people to have a foot in the game? And this whole betting thing, is that becoming more exciting and more imaginative? These prop bets, these side bets that you talked about in poker, sound incredibly entertaining. I know that in the tech space, some of these communities where you can do unusual bets are very, very popular platforms. I don't know if that's an evolving world within horse racing.
I don't think the breast implants bets will be evolving too much. But first point about the get entry into the horse world as such, that has become easier because there's been a growth in micro share syndicates, so small syndicates where you can enter in at 50 quid buy-in levels. So that makes it more accessible. Gone are the days of having to pay thousands of pounds. Obviously that still happens, but thousands of pounds to buy your own horse. Now you can get in with an ownership group and what have you. Entry into racing, yes, it is a bit more accessible, which is good news. But ultimately, like, if you want to compete at the top level, it's still going to cost you a lot of money. I think that has got better, and I think it's needed to get better as well, because ultimately we need to reach out to as many people as possible. And from a betting point of view, I mean, what's interesting is what's happening in America, really, because like the gambling laws are changing in America rapidly. And when that happens, I don't know how many states now allow betting, but like way more than before. When that changes fully, what you'll get is you will get the space. It goes without saying, but once America's on board, it's going to be mega, basically. So that's when you will see a real growth in that space. You'll see lots of prop bets, if you like. You'll see lots of different markets, different ways to bet. DraftKings has become very popular, which is a bit of a fantasy game. That's massive in America. There's lots of things happening, but America will drive that, I think, and Asia. But with the change in the laws, I think America will take that to a new place, and then obviously those things will be implemented over here.
And when you look at sport, we've seen an explosion. I'm probably the least informed person in Britain around football, but you've seen an explosion in money involved, which is, some people can ride that wave pretty hard, other clubs less so, other people less. But when you look at media and the drive to survive Netflix production and its impact on Formula One, there seems to be so much around horse racing that is, it was referred to the other day in a conversation, that you can, however much money you've got, it doesn't, you can't control the outcome. But then in the horse racing world, there's so many components to it. What to you is really under kind of shown? And if you were to be leading the production of a Netflix production within the horsing world, what to you would be the kind of the biggest parts that could pull people in?
I made a documentary a few years ago, not quite Drive to Survive level, but funny enough, it's actually being turned into a feature film, which is great. So I might have to speak to a couple of your family members about potential roles in it or directing it or whatever. Anyway, the point I was going to make is, after I did the Riding a Dream documentary, I then put forward another idea, which was a bit of I don't know whether you remember a program called 15 by Jamie Oliver, where he took people from care homes and homeless shelters, trained them up to be chefs, and then in turn opened a chain of restaurants on the back of it. And it did very well. The show was really interesting because ultimately the human interest stories within that was what was appealing. That was what was appealing. And I wanted to do something similar to that in racing. And the powers that be, for whatever reason, I think COVID happened, it didn't take off. Anyway, I'm waffling around the point, really. I think, and ITV have done a series called Champions Full Gallop. I think what is so important about racing is there are so many components involved, but at its core, there are these incredible animals. And because the amount of people involved in the sport, there are so many human interest stories within horse racing, right? So everywhere you go, you will get an emotional story. There will be something that has happened to someone that means that, Charlie McCarthy, right, who owned the Supreme winner, he just recovered from cancer 2 months before his horse won, and him and his family were over. He was given the all clear, and the tears of joy were just so obvious. I would really tap into that side of the sport. Obviously, the animals are the stars, right? They are incredible horses, as we know. But if you want to engage with people, then I think you need to tell them those stories, and then they will root for that person and their horse. Aldeniti, go back into the late 80s. Bob Champion had cancer. The horse was basically going to retire because of an injury. They came back and won the Grand National. There was a feature film made. The Bob Champion Cancer Trust has raised like 25 million for cancer since then. But most people still know about Bob Champion and Aldeniti because of this hugely emotive story around it. And I think racing provides that literally daily, whether it's a groom, whether it's a jockey, whether it's a trainer, owner, whatever it may be. It's there in front of us. I don't think we quite tap into it as well as we could at the moment.
There are so many wonderful parts of the horse racing world. Hard work. There's so many different people involved. It's popular across the globe. But also there are stories of things not working out, but the most remarkable stories where things do work out. I heard a betting story, which, if it's okay, I'm going to pass you the baton to tell. I'm hoping you know it. Around someone working in the stables in Lambourne and winning some huge bet on an accumulator. Do you mind just telling us about that story?
Sure. So he was a stable lad. So he was working at Nicky Henderson's yard. He was working in Seven Barrows. So Nicky Henderson, he's one of the best trainers, champion trainer in the past. Anyway, he had a load of good horses and they were all going to run at the Cheltenham Festival. And at the start of the season, so the Cheltenham Festival is in March, the season starts in October, he put on an accumulator bet for all 7 to win. The Magnificent Seven, they ended up calling it. Now, the prices at the time were like massive prices compared to what they went off on the day. A few were favourites, some were 10 to 1. I don't think he had to put much on. I think he maybe put, say, £10 each way accumulator on the 7 or something like that. I won't get the numbers exactly right. I do know how much he won, though. He won £1 million because all 7 ended up winning from the stable. So the bet he put on, the horses he looked after, he rode out, he ended up winning £1 million from it, and now set up as a trainer in America. So without that bet, he would never have been able to do that. Yeah, it's extraordinary, and fair play to him. And those are the stories that you want to hear, basically.
So extraordinary. And because what does it involve working in a stable?
It's proper graft. That you're up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the freezing cold in the winter. You're riding a horse out 4 times in the morning, as in 4 different lots, say. So you do 4 horses. Sometimes it can be below freezing. You then have to get your horse ready to the races, sometimes have to go racing, and then you come back and you have to feed the horse, give them evening stables and look after them in the evening. So it's kind of 24/7 care for these horses. If you're working in a national hunt yard, it's in kind of Baltic conditions, long days, late nights, for not much reward in terms of it's not hugely financially rewarding, but ultimately you're being with an animal you love, you're outside, there's a community within racing, but also within the yards you work at. So there are huge benefits to it, but at times it can be very tough. And when it goes really wrong, and sadly it does occasionally happen in racing, I don't think you'll find a more, well, I'm sure you could list a few, but it's a very emotional job as well. And there's such highs in the sport, and then there's the ultimate highs, and then there's the ultimate lows as well in racing. And I think the staff who care for these horses, who get up every morning to give them the carrot and ride them out and spend 24/7 with these horses, they're who I really empathise with in the sport. And actually, to go back to your last question, I think showcasing them would be a good way of showcasing the love and the welfare and all this stuff around the sport. They're brilliant people, and they don't get anywhere near the recognition they deserve.
And jockeys, what is the average height of a jockey? In
5'6" or something, maybe.
Yeah.
So,
But the devotion,
small.
tell us about the devotion. Are there any facts around the devotion of a jockey?
No, but I don't know any facts necessarily, but ultimately they are putting their bodies on the line all the time, wet to make weight for races, grim. So a lot of the time a jockey will go to the ride horses out in the morning. So he'll do the morning's work, exercise, then sweat in the bath for 2 hours maybe to lose £6, make themselves £6 lighter. Sometimes it can be more. I'm probably underselling it there. Not eat all day, perhaps the day before if you've got to do really light to have a chance of winning a race. So then you're like massively dehydrated, you're obviously starving, you're knackered because you've been up early, and you've got to go and compete with the best jockeys out there to try and win a race. And if you ride a bad race, you get slagged off by every punter there is. You probably lose the ride from the owner. You know, your primary sort of thing that you experience at work is defeat. It's just relentless, right? Now, obviously, when you get to the top, you have great moments and you ride the best horses, but it's a very volatile and quite fickle existence as well, because you can be in favour one day and then out of favour the next, and then you have to start again. And if you don't turn up at a race course, you might lose the ride, which means you might not get a ride on another horse. So a lot of the time, and they're self-employed, so a lot of the time the jockeys will be driving from, say, Newmarket to Hamilton in Glasgow for one ride, which they'll get 120 quid from. But you think about the petrol and the travel and things, you know, you're going there for a loss, but just so you don't lose rides in the future. You know, so you've got to play the game, you've got to be good with owners, you've got to be physically in good shape, you've got to be mentally so resilient. I really do have huge admiration for jockeys, because what they put their bodies through is relentless. And we only see them riding in the race with our bets on them and hoping they do a good job. But yeah, if a jockey rode a bad race, I'd be pretty forgiving of them.
And looking at that whole racing world, how do you want it to evolve in the next 10 years? Where is the sort of mecca for you in that sense?
I think What's important for me is that the next generation have an appreciation for racing. I feel like students are really connecting with racing again. I've seen a lot of students going racing recently and a lot of young people talking about it again, which is good, really good. I think there was a sort of middle period, probably my generation, really, maybe a slight few years older than me, where they just dismissed racing a bit or weren't interested in it. So I think we've got this kind of block of 5 to 10 years of people that, who might be owners now or who racing would have hoped to have been owners, not really that engaged in the sport. So capturing them again is really important, because if this is to continue to thrive or re-emerge, it's going to need the next generation on board with it in lots of ways. I think that it pulls back a bit to the documentary I made and the outcome of that, but I think racing needs to be much more diverse and multicultural, because I think 100 years ago you could get away with being quite an elite white person sport, but I definitely don't think you can now, and I don't think you should want to either, to be honest. So I think we need to tap into areas and communities we haven't tapped in before. Otherwise, we'll get a bit lost by other things that engage well with different communities, different areas of society. So I think that's important. And ultimately, it's about growth, right? All these points are about how does racing maintain its position as a national sport, because I think it's always been considered a national sport, but I just get the sense that it's slightly losing that tag. It's always been a bit niche, but ultimately it's always been in existence in the country. And I think that for racing to really stay there, it's going to need to connect with the next generation and kind of all walks of society, basically. Because if we don't, we will get lapped. We might slightly be being lapped already. We'll get lost and forgotten about. And show jumping is a good example. Show jumping was on terrestrial television in the, I want to say, late 80s. It might have been the 70s, but it was massive. Like everyone in the country knew show jumpers. And it fell off terrestrial television. And now show jumping still exists. It's a very wealthy person's sport and still is quite popular. But if you walk down the high street and said, name me a show jumper to someone in the street, they literally would not be able to name you one show jumper, other than like in an Olympic year, probably. And I really don't want that to be the case for racing. And I feel slightly that it might just be going that way. So I think we need to do everything we can to keep people engaged in it on a national level.
Yeah, absolutely. Horses, people have this amazing connection with horses. This is where I'm not going to tell you I'm actually allergic, but we'll move on. I heard a really moving story where someone suffered huge anxiety and nothing was really working over 3 years. This woman's life was really in dire straits. And then she was tasked with living with a horse and looking after the horse for a few weeks, and it just completely flipped her whole sense of trusting something external. People do talk about having these remarkable relationships with horses. Tell us a bit about that.
There are lots of centres, if you like, that have been set up, riding for the disabled, riding for autism, lots of centre. If anyone's listening to this and are interested by that, I mean, you just simple Google of that will tell you one. Horses have this incredible knack of kind of knowing, like this almost sixth sense of knowing what mood a human is in and what they need to do to cheer them up, basically uplift them. And they're also, a horse can spot nervousness as well, but they're very gentle. So I've seen firsthand, we've taken, I say we, the sport of horse racing has taken horses to hospitals, to elderly homes, care homes and things like that. And when there is someone who is fragile or delicate, a horse very much acts accordingly. And to see that is just the most beautiful thing. It really is. You can't help but be caught up in the emotion of that. And in Australia, actually, I lived there for a few years, and there was this grey horse whose name escapes me, which I'm really annoyed about because he's a legend. But this sort of stunning, a champion horse. He won like multiple Group 1, so he was a very famous and successful racehorse, and he was great. So he was like the equivalent of Desert Orchid, but back in Australia. Anyway, what he did in retirement was because he was so gentle and such a beautiful character, he became a horse that kind of was taken around the country to hospitals, to, as I said, care homes, special needs schools and things like that, and was this kind of national on this horse because of the work that he did in just enhancing humans' lives. And they're extraordinary animals. Like I can't stress enough, if people haven't, obviously not you because you're allergic to them, but if you can go around horses, just to be in their presence, just walk around as stables, it is just amazing. They all have different personalities. Don't get me wrong, some bite and some are feral, but only a small handful of them. But that's the same for humans as well. That's probably why prisons exist. But look, on the whole, they're life-changing animals. I really do mean that. I've seen it firsthand. I'll die on my sword on that one. They are the greatest animals that walk the earth, I think. They're just beautiful.
Amazing. We're going to move on to the quickfire questions. The first one is maybe a bit tricky. Can you give us one observation that you have from your unique experience of being a presenter around people?
I think anyone with an ego is invariably a massive arsehole. Sorry, that's probably not the answer you want.
No.
I think it pulls back to everything I'm saying. TV is quite TV, film, whatever, right? Like, you're dealing with, in inverted commas, stars, right? That's the pedestal they're put on and brainwashed into believing. And I think I've seen and heard a lot of stories where I've just thought of gone, like, people have slightly lost sight of who they are. Like, really, at our core, we just want to be like, this sounds really cheesy and wishy-washy, but our core as human beings, we want to be nice to everyone and we want everyone to be nice to us, right? That's just the kind of simplicity to life. Be polite, be nice, look after everyone, and hopefully everything will be okay. And when you start treating people who are perceptually below you differently, when you start talking down, whatever, right? Just when you start believing your own bullshit, you lose sight of who you are. So I think it's really important, no matter whether you're in TV, whether you're a hugely successful business person, whether you're just starting out, to, it sounds really, again, wishy-washy, but be nice to everyone, treat everyone with respect, treat everyone kindly. You were in their shoes once, they might be in your shoes one day. And I've seen in my experience as a presenter, people treat me differently, right? Because I'm the presenter. They treat me differently to how they treat the runner. And I think that's fucking shit, to be honest with you. We're all the same. We breathe the same air. We circle the same earth, whatever, right? It's just, I think, never lose sight of the fact we're all on a level playing field, really. And if you have that attitude, then you'll be hopefully looked after, I think.
Yeah, it's always, it knocks the air out of me a bit sometimes when you meet two people who have achieved the same success in an area, but just with vastly different attitudes to how they treat people.
Yeah.
And it's really probably largely a product of just how happy or unhappy they are. But I guess that just shows how important it is for people to be reminded of those that achieve great success but are incredibly humble and grounded and great role models. 3 things you get joy from.
Not to do with work or just in general.
It can be anything. The more quirky, the better.
Poker.
Yeah.
Probably. Backgammon. I love playing backgammon. I play a lot of backgammon. I watch backgammon videos on YouTube. I'm very sad, really. They're all like degenerate gambling related games. Poker, backgammon. And to be honest, I know that and sport is basically the defining sort of constant in my life. So any sport, I adore sport, whether it's watching it, talking about it, playing it. I owe sport everything, really.
A favourite book, film, or artist that isn't obvious?
I'll give you Hans Williams as a singer. I really like his music. He's very chilled, but I don't think many people would know his name. Matthew Small is an artist I really like. I got some stuff of his from Nellie Duff in Columbia Road Art Gallery. And he does these very sort of striking images of people. But he's someone I like. Film, anything directed by Leonora Lonsdale, I probably should say.
Shout out, yeah. She's got...
or appearing Esme Lonsdale.
Yeah, exactly.
She's got the Jack Whitehall thing coming out, doesn't she?
Yeah,
Malice.
Yeah, which it's received some fantastic coverage.
Yeah,
and
I've read the reviews.
It's top of the list for lots of people to
Great.
check out. And one thing you can add to your bucket list today?
I would love to go to the Palio in Siena I watched a documentary about it the other day, and I've never been. You're basically traveling back in time to watch this kind of horse race in Siena Square, and yeah, I'd love to go to that.
Oli, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. You've given us such a privileged insight into so much, the world of presenting, horse racing, and what's so clear is just how much pleasure it gives you, but also how much pleasure it gives other people, but how a lot of it's not really under the scope yet, and a lot of it's hidden, which is obviously you're going to be changing that over time more and more.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thanks so much for having me on.